Hello, everyone, and good morning, afternoon, or evening as applicable to you. For me, it's morning, so we're going to go with that one. We're going to give it just a minute for everybody to be able to enter into the audience as well as David to be able to join us, and then we will get started. Oh, hey, Beetle Dude. Hey, everybody, give us just a couple minutes and then we'll be getting started. We're just waiting on David to be able to hop up here with us.
Oh, hi.
Apologies for the delay. We're having a Discord issue, but give us just a minute. We'll get it figured out. All right, there we go. We do love Discord.
Absolutely.
Welcome everybody, again to our AMA today. We have with us a very special guest in David Shin. So David is from Clayton. We're going to do a little bit of an intro for him here in just a moment, and then we're going to go through some questions that were submitted as well after he has a chance to give us some insight from himself also. So we are going to go ahead and get kicked off now. Uh, so to give some background for our community members, David Shin. David has a long history in crypto. He has appeared with CNN, CNBC, Bloomberg, New York Times, Swiss TV, and The Economist in various forms related to crypto. He comes from the banking industry, previously the Asia head of global equity derivatives and repo sales for TD Bank, helping to develop their strategy on digital assets. David also drafted TD Bank's response to the Canadian regulators on crypto regulations in Canada. Excuse me, in Canada. Since then, David has held key positions with Bitcoin.com, the Tezos Foundation, and he is now currently the head of global adoption for Clayton. Obviously, you all know why that's relevant to us. So before we go into questions, I wanted to give David a second and see if there's anything that he wanted to add to his background, as well as maybe an overview of how you got into the crypto industry and what ultimately brought you to Clayton now.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Bolin. It's great to be here. I'm so impressed with this community. Um, I think great summary on the bio. Thanks for that. I guess, one thing I do want to add, I've been in crypto for a very long time. You'll hear a lot of people say that. I usually find that people generally who refer to being in crypto for a long time, quote unquote, usually means they got in during the ICO boom of 2017. I've actually been in crypto since 2012. I was one of the first ASIC miners. I was based in Hong Kong at the time, and really, at that time in 2012, there wasn't very much of a community in Asia, let alone Hong Kong, for Bitcoin. But having such high value and high regard for community, which is what attracted me to crypto, I felt that it was important to get something up and running. So I pulled in a few people that were what I would call Bitcoin babies at the time to come and help me set up something called the Bitcoin Association of Hong Kong. And some of those Bitcoin babies are now Bitcoin giants, because one of them was Arthur Hayes from BitMEX. He and I are still very close. Another person was Jihan Chu of Kinetic. So yeah, I mean, lots of history there, and it all started in Hong Kong.
Very nice. What brought you to Clayton?
What brought me to Clayton? I was with Tezos, as you mentioned earlier, when I had one of the co-founders of a very large Web2 platform company called Kakao in Korea reach out to me and ask me if I could come and help them globalize their blockchain. And so, having someone that senior, sort of that powerful, if you will, because Kakao is a very large company in Korea, reach out to me. A, I was humbled, but B, also I took it as a challenge to really try and help them with some sort of global strategy. So, I mean, it's probably worth footnoting that for me, I've always kind of been in crypto for all the right reasons, at least in my mind. I really strongly believe in the technology of, Web3 and decentralization, but also I really believe in communities, and having communities really drive the technology agenda in terms of, developing requirements, in terms of building, in terms of distribution, all that stuff. So yeah, I saw it as a challenge, Bolin, and really was humbled to have them ask me to do that.
That's awesome.
So I got a follow-up question. So you mentioned 2012. However, your like traditional finance streak didn't really end then, right? There was a bit before, and I think if people went and pulled up your LinkedIn, and probably many people in the community probably have, since we have a lot of very diligent people that like to get all the background. I mean, you have a pretty golden star list of employers here. I mean, from Morgan Stanley to Standard Chartered Bank. Looks like after 2012, you were at Barclays, which is a pretty demanding division to be in as well. Just kind of curious with all this, what has kept your draw and that interest to be so dedicated to the industry, the movement, the innovation, while also bridging with the traditional side? And then what kind of ultimately made you tip to go, I guess, all in? I mean, you know, my background, I have a similar but much shorter lived story of doing the big exit to start this, but this is you know, seems like a very interesting story.
Yeah. No, appreciate you asking that, Jimmer. Good question. You know, I've always been being born and raised in Canada, even though I'm Korean heritage. I've always had a libertarian chip in me, which is why, you know, growing up, I was really fond of Che Guevara. I dropped out of high school for a year to go follow the Grateful Dead. Really loved, you know, that sort of community feeling of the Deadheads. Um, and so, having said that, being an Asian dude, my parents still wanted me to go into banking. So, you know, for any other sort of Asian people that are online at the moment, you may or may not understand this, but at least in my generation, you know, the Asian parents were quite strict in terms of education, but also with respect to what type of careers they thought you should have, whether it's doctors, lawyers, or being in banking. So, you know, there was a side of me where I felt like I needed to continue to be the good son, the good husband, the good father, continuing with, you know, a banking job that really had no problems at the time. But there was a side of me that was just burning, the passionate side of me saying that knowing what I knew with Bitcoin and blockchain and the whole idea of decentralization, I really didn't believe that the banks had a chance. And so at that stage, it was a matter of timing and just making sure that I exited at the right time. And that really required me to be, you know, because I was in banking for almost 20 years, it really required me to be not just mentally ready, but also in a sense spiritually, like aligned to go so I can really, you know, at that stage, really push and drive all the things that I really wanted to do in crypto. And so that was in 2019. It took 7 years of what I call playing the Bruce Wayne Batman drama, where, you know, during the day I was Bruce Wayne because I had to be, and then at night I was Batman. And it was 2019 when I said, okay, well, screw this, I'm going full-time Batman.
Well, we're glad you did. If you click right above where you're clicked in, it says AMA Voiceless Chat. You'll see our community is supporting a lot of the comments you've made. I'll just read a couple of them out loud. Canada's the answer for everything. Wow, he's a deadhead. I'm all in. There's gifts of we feeling that Jerry Garcia vibe. So you're getting love from the community. Thanks for the added clarity.
Great to
Most
hear. Great to hear.
definitely. I'm now going to resist the temptation to just make this an AMA about your life story, and I'll save that for another time because that's worth at least an hour of everybody's time anyway. But we'll do that another day. I do. I did want to note also because it's pretty cool actually. In my opinion, we actually have a pretty healthy Canadian following as well as a pretty solid like Malay, particularly, and Filipino following, as well as a decent sized Japanese one, Chinese. So I definitely think I think you're speaking to the right audience as well. Now that
Yeah,
you're out of Canada memes.
absolutely. There's the all the Asians know what I mean by the parents who really have high expectations. I'm sure they've gone through it themselves.
So with that, I did want to ask you one more general question before we get into some of the ones that were submitted from our community. So I've mentioned to our community before, but just to reiterate, uh, a lot of our departments are having regular weekly sync meetings with our counterparts with Clayton, and so I've gotten to talk with and get to know the marketing side pretty well over the last few weeks. And one of them, John, said that if we were doing an AMA with you, we had to ask you what your favorite story as a crypto OG is.
Yeah, I've got lots of them. Maybe I'll just tell you, the one that kind of comes to mind now. Um, when I was mining, I was running a lot of spreadsheets with my partners on where the difficulty rate was, and how many more chips we needed to buy, and all this kind of stuff. And it really dawned on me about a year in that this is a means to an end. It's an endless loop of just feeding capital into a system if you wanted to play the game. So I decided to really take a step back, look at crypto, and say to myself, there's got to be more to crypto than just mining Bitcoin. And that's when I found Ripple, and I started. This was in 2013. I sold my part of the mining operation, took my Bitcoin, and I decided, I want to try my own startup, and maybe that's what'll get me out of Barclays. And so I set up my own company called Paywise at the time in 2013. And back then, for any OGs out there, Ripple's strategy was to really set up XRP gateways around the world, and to basically essentially have fiat on-ramp, off-ramps with XRP through those gateways. And I felt like, looking at Ripple, that they had enough there in terms of their tech stack and their blockchain. And yes, it was people will say, yeah, it was pre-mined back then. You don't want to be a part of that. But again, for me, it was more about the technology than the political ideology behind Bitcoin, and really seeing technology for where it was going to go next. And so Ripple really intrigued me, particularly because when I was in the banks, I felt that Swift was, quite frankly, taking the piss out of everyone. It was very expensive to move money, and the U.S. government controlled Swift. So I came up with Paywise, and Paywise was the first company in the Ripple ecosystem to basically say in 2013, rather than building these gateways around the world and becoming just another project doing that out of Hong Kong, why not use Ripple as the backbone to go after Swift for large cross-border payment transactions? And so I started shopping my business plan around. It got in the inbox of a guy named Gary Kreeman out in Silicon Valley. For those of you who don't know the name, Gary Kreeman founded Match.com in the US, and he ultimately sold it. He's a venture capitalist out of the Valley, very well known. And he called me up and he said, David, when can you get to San Francisco to meet Chris Larson and the team? So towards the third quarter, I think, of 2013, I went out to San Francisco. I met Chris and the whole team, Arthur Brito, all the guys, David Schwartz. Still have a line into Chris. And at the time, around just before that time, actually, in Hong Kong, this is a true story, guys. I had someone contact me in LinkedIn by the name of Matthew Mellon. And he said in the message, he said, David, I heard you're the Bitcoin guy in Asia, so I'm going to come and fly out and see you. I didn't know who this guy was. I Googled him, and lo and behold, he's Matthew Mellon, sort of the main trust child of the Mellon family. So you may know Carnegie Mellon, you may know, Bank of New York Mellon. That was Matthew. And your listeners can Google his name. They'll see who he was, how big of a profile he was. But he was also an early adopter of Bitcoin. So he ends up coming to see me. He literally got on his plane and he flew out to meet me in Hong Kong. We became very, very good friends. I was a trusted person for him in terms of Bitcoin, which is why I convinced him at a certain point that he needed to meet Chris and take a look at Ripple, because his profile, I felt, would have been very good for Chris, and just getting Ripple in 2013 to another sort of level. So the what happened from there was I introduced Matthew to Chris. Matthew flew out to San Francisco to meet Chris. They became very close. And Matthew wanted to invest in Ripple, but they were just closing their Series A. And so he couldn't get his investment in. He called me. He asked if I could speak to Chris. I did. Chris ended up giving him a portion of his own equity valued at Series A. So Matt became a shareholder of Ripple. And if you Google Matthew Mellon and Ripple, you'll see how much he was involved before he passed away in 2018. And I can tell you guys that that was because of an introduction that I made that created quite a bit of history for Ripple.
That's incredible. I mean, the power of who you meet is always incredible and never to be underestimated.
I think it's yeah, I think it's rare. Like I guess in your 10 years, you've probably seen, and I'm gonna kind of recycle a term that I've heard a few times at different talks at crypto conferences. I think in Web3 there's a certain amount of innovation, but a lot of imitation. And I imagine your own interest, the interest of other prominent individuals that look at businesses and opportunities all day, and even in their sleep, it's just in their blood, and they see good opportunities. When they see good opportunities, they do put their money where their mouth is. I think the innovators in the space are so important, and that's really what we've been trying to do since day one. I think there has been some imitation on the back of DeFi Kingdom's innovation, and we welcome that, and we actually look to welcome anybody to join us. But I'm curious with those that you've seen be successful, or maybe some that slipped a bit and weren't as successful as they could have. Has innovation played that key role in both interest and success in the industry? And if not, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, for me, life is all about people, right? Whether it's online personalities or IRL, like in real life personalities. Everything we do, all the impacts, both positive and negative, is somehow related to a person transaction, right? And so I think, for me, everything happens for a reason. I do believe that. I've just been very fortunate in the 10 plus years that I've met some really interesting people, and a lot of them have done very well. Another guy that I met very, very early on was Brendan Bloomer, one of the founders of EOS, who was actually based in Hong Kong. And Brendan was just very curious as to why I was so into Bitcoin. I remember he used to ask me, like, why would you risk such a well-paying, great job at the bank? Especially, because I am 47 now, so it was around the age of, 36, 37 when I was involved with this early on. And, I wasn't a spring chicken back then. So, I had a wife, I had kids, and he was so curious. Like, we'd have these meetups and he'd always come and sit beside me. He's like, I just want to know, Dave, like, why are you risking so much? And I remember telling him, because I said, I love the community. I love the community. I love the people involved. I love the fact that the average individual that I meet in Bitcoin not only has high IQ, but they have high EQ and low PQ. And I remember him asking me, like, what is PQ? And I said, political quotient, right? I said, in the banks and, in all the years that I worked there, I would be working with very, very high IQ people, but they would have low EQ and their PQ was high because it was always about fighting for money, or what they call P&L, profit and loss, on the trading floor. So, you get to really sense what kind of kaleidoscope of personalities, regardless of how smart everyone was in the room, what that develops and what that, creates. And so this experiment with decentralization Web3, for me, was not just about the technology, but it was about the people in the community.
Got it. Thanks. I was told I was echoey. I just adjusted my mic to be my headphone mic. Hopefully, Bolon is a little better.
Yeah, you're good.
All right.
I was gonna use that story also though, real quick, as a plug for how you and Dreamer met.
Yeah, quite interesting. You know, we met in New York during NFT New York over breakfast, and uh, perhaps your community knows of a gentleman by the name of Peter. I won't mention his last name, who is a part of the Harmony ecosystem. He introduced us and he asked if I could speak to Dreamer. We sat down and we immediately clicked for many reasons. Maybe because of both of us having a banking background as well, and both of us having given up that career for this. But we had a very long discussion. We went over time. I think Dreamer did a great job in expressing very sincerely how much he cared about the project, but more importantly, how much he cared about the community, and how engaged they are. And, he felt that he wanted to do something that was great for them. Um, and that sincerity and the genuineness really stuck with me. And I, then explained to him why I thought why Clayton could be such a great place for not just the DeFi kingdoms, but the community as well. And yet, so that was really it. We had a great conversation, and I guess we can say the rest is history.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some reactions to the connection. For those that are unaware, the individual mentioned has since left and is working at Findora. So we're still in talks. We really strive to make the best and most healthy connections with the individuals we work with, because as mentioned a moment ago, it's all about people. It's about people and relationships. Peter and DeFi Kingdoms had a really good relationship. He didn't fully represent the entire decisions made, with Harmony, but he did have our truest, like best potential at heart. And this introduction and others that he's provided, and others that in the Harmony ecosystem, has shown their love and support for DeFi Kingdom. So really glad that we met. On my side, I was incredibly impressed, not only with the overlap of experience that we had, but a lot of people in the traditional finance world don't have the personalities that Dave has. Being very, very well-rounded, looking for innovation, hard work, success, while also finding that balance that was mentioned a little bit in your backstory. That all came through in a very sincere, genuine way, which are great building blocks for a potential partner, and to build a real relationship in a growing space. So happy we connected, and happy for the rapid follow-ups that came after.
Yeah, I mean, truly, guys, just to add to that, I really see this as more of a marriage than it is, a date or an experiment, so to speak. I strongly believe there are very strategic opportunities for both sides to grow together. I'm a firm believer of connecting the East and the West when it comes to Web3 and crypto. There's only so much more to be built and gained if we have a strong bridge between teams in the West and teams in the East. And so I do feel like, with respect to the two teams, as we're speaking a lot more, just to kind of share some insight with your listeners, as our two teams are sharing more and working together daily now, I feel like there is that rhythm and that cadence there, where we're syncing up quite a bit. So I'm really looking forward to, quote unquote, this marriage.
Most definitely. Could not agree more. Well, let's get into some of the questions that were submitted from our community. So we had a good response from them for some potential questions. We did have to narrow it down a little bit for the sake of time, but we're going to see how many we can get through. So the first one is, what do you feel sets Clayton apart from other L1s in the industry, both generally, but also specifically around gaming, NFTs, and metaverse?
Great question. I'll say we're probably the only real active layer one now left in Asia. I mean, there are other layer ones. I don't think they're as active, and I'm talking about layer ones that are originated out of Asia. Zilliqa comes to mind, but really, they're not active. There's still, pockets of Neo developers, supporting the Neo ecosystem, but again, they're not really that active. So really with Terra Luna, and as we know, that kind of no longer being there, we are really the only active native Asia-based layer one now. And so that puts us in a huge position of advantage, in my opinion. I think, one thing to probably highlight here that's worth noting is outside of the US, a large swath of the liquidity for crypto comes out of Asia. It used to be highly concentrated out of China, but since China's closed down for business due to regulation, the market where it has the second largest pooled liquidity is actually Korea. And so, with us kind of clearing the path and being the only, Asia domiciled layer one that's active now in the region, we really think, and with the liquidity behind us in the market, we really, really think that there's a big opportunity here. So that's how I would see the differentiation. I think, specific to gaming, NFT, and metaverse perspective, I would say that we're also the only block layer one chain that has AAA game studios who's built Web3 games that are live and active on chain, right? So we have Netmarble, who have built one of their traditional games they brought over to a blockchain called Nino Kuni. So people can check that out. It's NINU KUNI. Massive game. You can download it on Apple or Google, and the game that you would be downloading is literally connected to Clayton, and you couldn't even tell. And it's a great game. No
Very
other
beautiful. Very beautiful, by the way.
Yeah.
Definitely go check it out.
And then, we have Mirror 4 is the other game that we made, which is another large AAA gaming studio has on Clayton. And we have many more that's coming out. So I think that's how we would differentiate is, to be very clear, no other chain that I'm aware of has currently live on mainnet AAA game studio games.
Pretty good differentiator. Pretty solid statement to make. All right. On the flip side of that, what do you feel Clayton lacks compared to some peer L1s, and do you have plans to improve those aspects?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we probably lack in the open source developer community. I think we could do some work there. A lot of our, and let me be very specific about that. So a lot of our developer community is really concentrated in Korea, right? And it's my job coming in here, as I mentioned earlier, to globalize the platform. And so what we're doing to fix that is we are actively rolling out our hackathon strategy. It's called Claymakers. And a lot of you will see, headlines around this. You'll see it on social media feeds. It should be coming through because we're actively now rolling this out ever since Korea Blockchain Week, where we did the first Claymakers hackathon. And we're doing one in Singapore during Token 2049. We're planning one in Indonesia. We're going to plan one in Vietnam. So we're going to continue to roll out this Claymakers hackathon program and really look for the best of the best and start building out a broader open source developer community other than just having Korean developers.
Very nice. I think this one you've semi-answered anyway, but we'll just throw it out there for fun. Do you feel that Clayton has a focus or strength in one particular area of Web3, DeFi, gaming, NFTs, etc.?
Yeah, we definitely do. The way we look at, I think the other thing that differentiates us is we actually have a strategy and we stick to it. We look at the market in a very specific way. The focus here for us is really NFT as the enabler for converting Web 2 to Web 3. We want more mass adoption. We don't think that just fighting for the same crypto users at every conference is the right strategy. We don't think trying to pay the biggest grant fund or investment to try and bring in big names is the right thing either. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take a step back, look at our ecosystem, look at what we're good at, what we're not good at, and say, okay, what can we do to drive higher adoption? Not fighting for the same crypto users, but converting Web 2 to Web 3. So Web 2 developers, Web 2 investors, Web 2 gamers, and bring them into Web 3 in a way where they feel comfortable, they feel like they're in a safe place, playing, building, investing. And so that's really what we're trying to do. We think NFT is the asset that really can drive and enable that Web 2 to Web 3 conversion. We also are, again, I want to touch on the fact that we are in Asia. And when it comes to gaming, I think I probably don't have to convince many people in the room here. Asia leads the way in many avenues when it comes to gaming. Particularly, the gamers in Asia are quite sophisticated. In addition to that, Asia really leads the way in mobile gaming, which I believe is the next gen for larger swaths of game players being adopting Web3. So right now for us, our particular focus or our strength is the fact that we have the Korean market, but we've also been quietly working on Japan. We have a massive, we feel that Japan will have a massive upside to the gaming part of Web3. We also like the fact that it's full of content IP in Japan, as we probably all can imagine. With NFT being the enabler for converting Web 2 to Web 3, we think if we can acquire and bring in some of that content and wrap that up into the ecosystem, that it can benefit the whole ecosystem. So we're very, very bullish on Japan, and we have Korea locked down. So we're very, we're very focused in that regard. We're not going to go out there to try and go tackle Latin America. We're not going to go blindly walking into India. We are very focused.
Very well.
I think that's directly synced with our Serendale 2.0 relaunch as well. We're looking to give it a little bit of a new flavor, cater to the region a bit better. We have some really exciting things cooking up on the token side, on the new hero class side, the new gene sets that'll be introduced as well, to cater not only to the really strong Korean audience and community at Clayton, but Japan and other neighboring communities as well.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. I'm really excited about some of the things that I've been hearing about on the roadmap for our marriage, quote unquote, right? So, it excites me to no end because I do know the community out here in Asia quite well. I know the gamers in Asia. They are definitely a little bit more sophisticated. I think they also are a little bit more, interested in looking at games from an economics perspective. And so it'll be a very, very easy transition, in my opinion, to get DeFi Kingdoms integrated into the markets that we feel we're quite strong in.
Fantastic. So next question, which also kind of ties right in there. So our community is obviously pretty excited about coming to Clayton. Is Clayton equally excited? And if so, why?
And absolutely, because I think that primarily because DeFi Kingdom, it feels like a family, right? Like I'm looking into my screen at the moment. I can see all these profile pics up here, and I feel like the attention is in the room. Like the community aspect of DeFi Kingdom really, really intrigues me. That's always been the most interesting thing for me initially. I mean, the game is obviously speaks for itself and it's great, and the team is fantastic, but the community is strong. And they're vocal in a very, what I would call net positive, constructive way. And this is what really fascinates me and gets me excited about bringing you guys in and bringing the community in. I think your community will really like what we're doing. And if they don't, I can always trust that they'll be net positive and constructive. And that feedback is, and the funnel to that feedback is really important. because the only way for any of us to improve any of this is to ensure that, if we care enough about it, that we're all putting in the right level of feedback, and that the people behind it supporting it are doing something, right? So I can always assure that from the Clayton side, we're ready to go. We're ready to make changes. We're ready to listen. And I just feel like your community is perfectly placed because this is what they do.
Well, I most definitely could not agree more with that because that's pretty much my whole role. But it's always good to have the appreciation of our community because they really are. They're a very very unique community, which we've talked about many times before, in that they are invested, not just financially, but in that feedback loop, which is awesome. So I'm always very grateful for them.
Yeah, and I'll just add like the net positive is a good choice of words, right? I think sometimes people misunderstand that a good community is one that is never constructive or negative, or suggesting things that are different than maybe the way they are now. And I feel like the relationship with Kingdom Studios team and the developers, the third party developers, a lot of prominent folks in the community, in the industry, listen to the community. I think when somebody expresses something that could be viewed as negative, and they aren't given a voice, and they aren't listened to, and they don't see change, then it can start to tip the scales a little bit where it isn't that positive. So some people, I've heard comments of, oh yeah, when communities go negative, it's really hard to shift it, but it's how'd you get there? It's likely the lack of empowerment or listening or reacting to communities. And I think that's where we found a lot of success through Bull On, through many of our amazing what we call knights, our moderators, and those in the community that are just looking out to educate new people, identify problems, in the identification of problems, share what they think is a solution, and then we listen. And I see Clayton working in a very similar manner. We've seen Avalanche work in a very similar manner, and many others that are successful and on the rise in the industry.
Yeah, one of my most favorite quotes related to communities is by Margaret Wheatley, and her quote is, "There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about." And when you think about that and how it applies to DeFi Kingdom, but more broadly crypto, it says a lot. It says a lot about the valuation of a community, right? It's not just the valuation of the technology. It's not just the valuation of the project as a whole. It's the valuation of the community that gives the valuation to that project. And that's how I really see that.
Definitely. So this one is again kind of related. Uh, Obviously, L1s have a big incentive to drive transaction volume. As the head of adoption for Clayton for a while now, are there other substantive benefits that someone in your role is looking for when building adoption for the chain other than just transaction volume? And do those elements, or which elements of DFK synergize well with that?
Yeah, what I look for is, how is there opportunities for connecting dots, right? So specifically, if we are bringing DeFi Kingdoms into Clayton and that marriage works, how can I then, basically go and connect DeFi Kingdoms to other dots in the ecosystem so that there's a thriving network effect happening, right? So we call this our partnership model. We look to provide this concierge service to all the projects that we bring in, because we feel like it's not just really about the success of the project, but it's about the success of the marriage, right? So we're putting in not just the day one effort, but day two, day three, right? And that's how the relationship evolves, and that's how we accrete more value longer term. And a big part of that is to ensure that we are connecting dots. So a good example of that is, I was earlier this week. I was speaking to the largest, one of the larger gaming guilds in India. Um, in addition to that, they were telling me that they're looking for some of the great games to be a part of on Clayton. And I said, well, guess what? We just brought on DeFi Kingdoms, and we'd love for you guys to speak to them, right? So things like that. I mean, I really push the whole organization and my team in particular to think not just about how great projects are and what we can do to help them, but in addition to that, what is the go forward plan and how do we execute that go forward plan? Which means that we have to think about connecting dots and creating that network effect.
Yeah. I'm actually going to use that and go slightly out of order on my questions because that ties so well into one of the other ones anyway, which is around what initiatives, financial collaborations, etc., are in place between DFK and the Klaytn Foundation for launch and continuity.
Yeah, we're committed to you guys, and we want to make sure that we have that go forward plan. This is something that my team and I are working on. We, just to share maybe a little bit of color on that, we're very large. We're very bullish on not just bringing good projects to the table, but we're also bringing in large communities. So I always have this Venn diagram on my whiteboard at the office, or on my presentations, I should say as well, where there's 3 circles representing the 3 focal domain points for us at Clayton. The first one is gaming, second one is content and IP, and the third one is communities, right? So really, and in the middle of all that is an NFT. So what we're really saying is there are these 3 domains that we're going to focus in on. And in each of those domains, the overlapping asset is the NFT that will drive and fuel the connection of those 3 domains. The one domain in particular that I want to highlight for this AMA is the community domain. So we've invested and we've brought in some of the biggest esports teams in the world, right? The ones that I can talk about are our affiliation and our relationship and the investment that we made with Loud, right? Loud is the biggest esports team in Latin America. And they have a guild that they've created that we've invested in. We've also invested in another, the Southeast Asia's largest esports team called EVOS. And they also are working on a guild strategy. And all these things, if you think about it, like, why are we investing in esports teams? Because we feel like there is a natural connection between the games that are being built on our chain and these communities playing these games and creating a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship by connecting those dots. And so, these are just examples of some of the things that we think about on our team in creating that extension. When we do bring on good games, when we bring on good projects, how can we connect that dot to the community dot?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So on a slightly more technical aspect, so DFK chain, which is our subnet that houses Crystal Whale, has recently been celebrating our daily transactions, sometimes as many as 4 million in a day, as we hit new all-time highs. If Serendale 2.0 on Clayton has that same amount of transactions, is that something the network is prepared for?
100%. The way I would address that question, which is a great question, is that if we weren't confident and we weren't able to provide that level of support, I don't think the AAA game studios would be building on our mainnet. Again, I'll use the example of Ni no Kuni. When they launched several months ago on the Apple Store, they were the 3rd most downloaded app globally. Okay. I can't remember the exact numbers, but well north of, let's say, somewhere between 3 to 4 million on the first day. So, you know, I am very confident, and I work with our CTO and our technical team every day. In fact, one of the sub teams called the Eco Development Team within the engineering division, I put that team together. So I'm very confident in Terry and Neo and Tanaya and the team, uh, along with the core developers that are based in Korea, that we have one of the most scalable blockchains. Otherwise, you wouldn't have AAA, like these are companies that are worth, billions. They're huge listed AAA gaming companies. We're also speaking to the ones in Japan. We have Gumi as a partner. If people know Gumi, I was just at the Tokyo Game Show. I just got back yesterday from Japan, and we had all these meetings with our partners there. We also did an after party with Kokone Connect, which is also a large gaming company in Japan. And everyone's really excited. The AAA gaming community is very excited about building on Klaytn. So I don't think, that's a long way of me saying, Bolin, I don't think they would feel comfortable post due diligence building on our mainnet if they thought that we couldn't handle large volumes.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. So on a broader scale, what do you think are the most important levers to activate in order to increase the adoption of blockchain technology?
Um, yeah, I mean, the most important levers, I think, is to, number one, have a good strategy. When I look at some of my peers out there, right, I won't mention names, but perhaps other block layer one chains, I just don't see their strategy, especially for gaming. It just feels like they're pulling, straws out of a hat. Um, for us, as I said, we're very focused in on converting Web 2 to Web 3, um, building communities, and integrating the West with the East, right? So converting Web 2 to Web 3 in terms of gaming, what that means for us is how do we diversify away from, just play to earn models and look at other models that could work, and work with our partners to develop in those other models. So some of the things that we've been discussing internally, or that I've been kind of bringing up in some of my internal presentations with the AAA game companies, is things like stake to play, right? To create the ability to earn and gain assets from a game, but then use those assets to stake to activate or access new parts of the game, right? So things like this, to evolve away from just play to earn, which has been such a big narrative for Web3 gaming, or things like compete to earn. Creating very rare NFTs and giving people access to those NFTs, and then using those to perhaps put into a loot box where people can play and compete to win the loot box. I think these types of models could have a lot more gumption. And you can build really good games around these types of economic models rather than just doing play to earn. So, we think about doing those, we look at these things and we think about these things because we think in order for us to really convert the real gamers from Web 2 to Web 3, we have to have good games and we have to be really thinking hard about better economic models in those games.
I think that gaming is a great way to drive adoption of basically everything, but mostly because I'm a nerd and I like to game.
We're in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. How would you? Oh, on that topic, actually, this works perfectly. How would you describe the South Korean blockchain gaming market? What do you see as DFK's main competitive advantages in that market?
Yeah, the Korean market for games, I mean, they know games. Um, you know, uh, some of the big, like T1, right? Some of the big esports teams are out of Korea, but on average, it's just a massive gamers market. So if you've ever been to Korea, you'll know that you could be on the train, you can be on the train going to work, and the average person will be on their mobile phone playing a game. Um, so it's a more sophisticated market per GDP when it comes to gaming. The consumption of gaming is much higher. In other words, people spend quite a bit of their time on games. Um, so I think it's hard to kind of try and slide into Korea not having a well thought out game product, especially not a well thought out economic component to the game product, and try and do well in Korea. You won't succeed unless you've been thoughtful about the game that you've developed. And so this is obviously, look, we all know DeFi Kingdoms in the industry across the board is very well known and well established because I think the team has been very thoughtful in designing the economics, but also making the game pretty damn fun to play. And with that, I really think that a more sophisticated market like Korea will much appreciate this type of product. So I have little to no doubt that it will be a seamless transition and that the Korean marketplace will embrace DeFi Kingdom.
Always good to hear. And one last question for you, which is kind of a two-part question. I'm not familiar with the Clayton community. How do we endorse large adoption of DFK when we may have cultural and/or language barriers to overcome and help the Clayton community embrace DFK?
Yeah, good, great question. I mean, I think the way I would address that is first and foremost, like I remember playing Japanese games on my friend Takashi's Nintendo that he brought over from Japan while I was in Canada, and all the language in the game itself was in Japanese, but I just kind of figured out how to play it, right? Um, so I think there's a little bit of that. Like if you have a really good game, whether it's in a language that you know or don't know, I think you'll still have a pretty decent draw. But in addition to that, I think really having a good global support team, which is really what my team does, to help transition the language. That's also very important to provide that support, right? So on my team, the average person generally speaks three languages. We have a lot of people who are in and out of not just Korea, but Japan, Indonesia. And so we really work with onshore support teams as well, who provide support to us when we need language operational overhead, right? So, for instance, when we're in, let's say, Indonesia, um, there's an onshore partner that we work with very closely that helps us with the community and the language issues, right? So I think there are many ways to ensure that there is support where you and the community, the team in the community isn't feeling too much language friction, I would call it. And we, on the same page, we need to work together in terms of us understanding where there could be language gaps, and the global team within Clayton, which is my team, needs to be there to support that 100%. And if there's a requirement that isn't in-house, then we're all in terms of getting that language support to make sure that DeFi Kingdoms is a success in that particular market, whether it be Japan or elsewhere.
Awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to come meet with us and speak to our community. I hope this isn't the last time. We'll start scheduling the one where you just tell us about your life story uh, as soon as possible because I need more detail there. But I really appreciate you, taking the time and answering a lot of questions for us and giving us a lot of background. I know this won't be the last one, I should say, not hope. I know it won't. And I look forward to doing some more. I wanted to give Dreamer an opportunity for any last thoughts of his, and then I figured we'd let you close us out.
Yeah, sure. I was in the voiceless chat as you guys were talking, and David, thank you so much for going through all of the questions that we had from our awesome community. And there was some questions around like, are some of the AAA game studios or other partners going to be kind of introduced to DeFi Kingdoms? And to hint back to your comment, one of the reasons we're going to Token 2049. Shout out to the event next week. I think it's Wednesday, Thursday for those that are in Singapore. And we are looking to maybe do a stream or two there. Might even drop some alpha related to the future of Serendo 2.0 while there. But the fact that we got invited there, sitting on that booth, and we're not only going to be high-fiving with Dave here and others, but probably getting direct intros to some awesome people in the industry. So I've seen a lot of interest there offline. Really excited to just get to know the team and naturally have others that are interested in the launch and the partnership collaboration. And I think, as you referred to here, as marriage, to get talking. It's through meeting in person, talking, seeing like minds come together that really allows that to flourish. So incredibly grateful that we are being invited not only to the event itself for the booth, but the side events, the conversations, the Telegram chats. So I'm very, very optimistic on where that'll lead. We're also very excited as a community and as a project to bring as much value as we can to Clayton. There's a lot that we can do together. Some have expressed, hey, is this going to cause, any cannibalism to like similar DEXs or DeFi protocols? And our answer and our approach has always been to welcome all with open arms, to gamify their products that aren't games, to add any DeFi overlay to games that maybe don't have as strong as we do, and have some cross-chain compatibility as well. We are hungry for others that are interested in that, and the ecosystem is rich with those type of minds and opportunities. So we're super excited. David, we actually say bullish kind of all together at the end of each AMA, even at the end of each internal meeting, and on stage as well when we do get opportunities to speak. We kind of yell it and ask everybody to join us. So we're going to hand it over to you to take us home, any of your closing comments. But when you are ready to close, if you are comfortable, I bet the community would love to hear a bullish, and we shall close this out.
Yeah, thanks. Look, thanks for that. Just my final comments. At around I would say, 20-minute mark into this, we went from about 150 in the audience to 200 and just a little bit over that. And the one thing I've noticed is the last 40 minutes, we have not had people drop out. I've done enough of these guys to know that you guys are a serious community. You care about this place. It's incredible. It's phenomenal. Like, really. It says a lot about why DeFi Kingdoms as a family has succeeded. So I really, really want to give you, commend you guys for that and continue that. I think community is really what drives and thrives building great games. And again, I just want to say thanks. And to close it off, here it is. Bullish.
Bullish.
Bullish. Thank you, David.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really enjoyed this. I hope to do it again soon.
Thank you.
All right, I'm hopping up. Thanks, everybody. See ya.